All right, we'll call to order our Safety and Public Works Committee meeting. It is 6:45 PM, April 17th, 2023 in council chambers. 8 items on tonight's agenda. First item is a street closure event application for Shep's Elbow Convention. Mr. Dean, go ahead.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair. So attached is the application for the event and alley closure, Shop's Elbow Convention this August. The dates in the application are incorrect. I verified with the applicant that the closure would occur from Friday, August 25th at 11 a.m. until the morning of Sunday, August 27th at 3 a.m. They would be utilizing the alleyway for the event, so they are also going to provide electricity, trash cans, and restrooms. The Laurel Street parking lot would remain open to the public during the event. As the council has been discussing recently, the city code does not allow for sale or consumption of alcohol in public streets or spaces in which this alley would be classified. So thus, in addition to requesting traffic control 1 week prior and providing a certificate of insurance before the event, staff has included an additional condition that council passes an ordinance allowing the sale and consumption of alcoholic beverages in public spaces.
All right. So even though we've been doing this for 20-some, 30 years, this gives us a little kick to get that other ordinance changed. I have no issue.
I would hesitate making this contingent on us passing that, because that's essentially saying, sorry, if we can't get 4 people of this council to follow staff's recommendation here, we're going to deny you your application. I would be willing to approve it without that contingency. So
Motion?
that's my motion. I would just approve the application with no contingency as staff's recommendation.
I'll second, but I have a question. If we approved it with the condition in place, is the whole application then denied if it doesn't pass that condition, or
That
could
would
it
be correct.
like just for that part of it?
Nope.
Okay.
They wouldn't be allowed to sell or consume alcohol within the alleyway.
Right.
They would be
They
restricted
could
to
still
their.
set everything up, but they wouldn't be able to serve alcohol outside,
Right.
which is a big
Correct.
part of
Yeah.
Yep.
their
So,
sales. It's
yeah,
all their sales.
the city code just specifies the alleyway, their patio, and that's still within their private business.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? Hearing none, go to a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Moving on, item number 2, we have a temporary and permanent easement for the ISD 181 Safe Routes project at Harrison. Mr. Dean, go ahead.
Sir, Mr. Chair, as part of the Safe Routes project, the city needs additional right-of-way to construct the new walk adjacent to the school, while also including a 6-foot boulevard to allow for tree planting required as part of the school's conditional use permit. The additional right-of-way is roughly a 5-foot strip in front of the school's property with some additional construction easement behind to allow for the project. The school board did approve the easement included in the packet and waived their right to appraisal and just compensation.
All right.
Motion to approve staff's recommendation on this, which is to, I don't have it right there.
Set those easements
Yeah.
as written in the memo.
Yes.
All right.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any more discussion? Hearing none, go to a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Item 3, we have another Safe Routes at Harrison item, and that's just approving the plans and specifications and authorize bidding. Go ahead, Mr. Dean.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair. So we are requesting approval to advertise the Safe Routes project for bids. Currently, the estimate's $372,615 and is expected to be funded through the state's Safe Routes to School grant program. Staff intends to open bids on May 5th at 10 a.m. with a recommendation of award at the May 15th council meeting.
Excellent. Are there any changes to this since we revisited the no parking that second time, or is it basically everything that it was that day?
Nothing has changed.
Okay.
I'll move to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any more discussion? Hearing none, go to a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Item number 4, we have a Widseth contract amendment for the Lum Park Road SPRA design changes. Go ahead again, Mr. Dean.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair. There have been continued discussions regarding both Lum Park Road and the trail adjacent included in the State Park Road Grant Project between both council and the park board. At the previous council discussion on Lum Park Road, it was determined to change the design back to match the existing width and continue to allow parking on both sides of Lum Park Road. As the project design was essentially completed, this change will require additional hours by Widseth to revise the design. At the park board discussion on the trail, the park board voted to recommend that council approves the additional Widseth contract amendment, or option 2, which allows for redesign of the trail segment to go through the park rather than along Lum Park Road. Realigning the trail will result in project construction savings by not having to extend the box culvert that goes underneath Lum Park Road. That work is currently estimated a little over $100,000. So staff is recommending the approval of contract amendment option 2 for the $13,300 to redesign Lum Park Road to maintain the current width, and then also realign the trail through the park as indicated in the exhibit.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Jeff.
When you talk about the box culvert, it's a less cost for that because it's not going to be as long? Is that what I understand?
We won't need to extend it now if we move the trail away from Lum Park Road. With it adjacent to Lum Park Road, we would have to extend the culvert to allow for it.
Yeah, and you didn't give us approximate savings on that then, did you?
It's roughly about $100,000 is the estimate
I
on the
thought-
culvert lengthening. Yep.
I was.
So it would be $10,000 cheaper for our contract amendment, which is what we're trying to approve now, but it would be $100,000 more in the actual project itself.
Correct.
And we're limited on what the grant actually covers, so
Yep.
essentially saving $100,000. And I like the trail design better going through the arch anyway. So, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, the park board felt that both things to be true. One, hopefully that will, end up with a savings on the actual project itself. But two, the alignment is a much better entrance to the park. It uses the historic archway that is still there. If we're gonna keep it, we might as well use it. But secondary to that is talks of having an overpass in this area. This alignment here also aligns with what those potential looks would be.
Overpass meaning pedestrian?
Potentially. I mean, we have been looking into it, whether or not that's actually gonna happen, can't say. However, that was one of the questions with this, is how does that then meet up with that potential overpass? This design meets that a little bit better.
Excellent.
I would move to approve this.
Option 2?
Yep, I'm sorry. Yep, as recommended.
Second.
Thank
All
you.
right, motion to approve option 2 for the $13,300 amendment to the SPR trail design and the realignment of the trail. All right, we have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? Hearing none, go to a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Moving on to number 5. This is a seal coat project bid. We had a couple bids. Mr. Dean, if you want to tell us about those?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair. So staff opened bids on April 12th for the 2023 Seal Coat project for College Drive and South 4th Street to Willow. We did receive 2 bids, the low bidder being Aztec in the amount of $134,294.96, which was about 7.2% underneath the estimate that we had. We did budget $150,000 in the capital plan for seal coating in 2023.
So it's within budget. That almost never happens. Just kidding, it does. We make sure it does. Right, guys? Unless you want to approve the other one.
Move to approve the staff recommendation for improvement 23.01, the contract to Asphalt Surface Technology Corporation, the amount of $134,294.96.
Second.
Motion is second. Any more discussion? Hearing none, go to a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Number 6, we have a discussion item on the right-of-way tree removal. I believe, is this Mr. Kramvik?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll take this one first, and I think Jesse has some input as well. So City Council adopted a tree policy in November of 2019. This tree policy outlines provisions related to tree planting in the city right-of-way, replacement of trees after public improvements, and removal of diseased, dead, and nuisance trees, both on private property and public property. So the discussion tonight is primarily related to nuisance trees in the boulevard area and whose responsibility should it be. Currently, within the policy and our code, it is the responsibility of the adjacent property owners. If they do not remove the tree as directed by staff through a notice of violation, essentially they get 20 days to remove the tree. The city at that point would abate the tree and assess it to the property, or they could pay the invoice as well. So staff did reach out to 5 similar sized cities and received 3 responses from Bemidji, Detroit Lakes, and Grand Rapids to see what they do within their tree policies. Each one of these cities manages all of their trees in the right-of-way, primarily through the Public Works Department, a little bit through the Parks Department, and then contracts dangerous or difficult trees out to tree removal companies. So the reason for this, the Community Development Department is the department that has a tree inspecting program within it. They're the ones that tag dead, diseased, nuisance trees. And we have been questioned in the past on whose responsibility it should be, since it is the property of the city right-of-way. So really, staff would like SPW to discuss this part of the policy and comment. Decision really can't be made tonight, as P&F would also have to be involved, especially if the city would look at doing this, because it would affect the budget. I know Jesse's going to talk about that a little bit, about budget and workforce. But in either event, staff does recommend reworking Chapter 14 of the City Code, which manages all city trees, both private and public trees, to make things more clear and concise. The goal, I guess, of this ordinance revision would be to have this ready for the end of June, which is the time that we really start looking at tagging trees. So with that, Jesse can elaborate a little bit more on Public Works.
Yeah, thank you, James. So, Sean, the street foreman, and I kind of discussed this matter a little bit, and the same thing with our Parks Department and what would we be able to handle in-house. Obviously, more of the smaller trees, the less dangerous trees, ones that aren't an imminent threat to somebody's private property. So if a tree is hanging over a house, those would be a concern for us. But if it's just a pretty straightforward tree and it's not too large, we would do our best to work with maybe even BPU. They've helped us in the past to down those trees on our own. But anything that was too large or potentially hanging over a house or something like that, we would want to contract out. We don't necessarily want to have that liability of damaging somebody's private property. We did not budget any money in 2023, so if this is something that we would want to move into effect this year, we would do our best to handle as many of the trees as we possibly could with our public works staff and be pretty earnest about those approaches. But if we did have to contract out any removals this year, we would be trying to find a way to budget or find a way in the budget to make that happen. We would look into 2024 to putting an actual budget line item for about, we were thinking of roughly 20,000, but we think that might be the high end of that. Like I said, most of the trees we were hoping that we can handle in-house with our staff. It's the trouble ones that we would have to contract out.
And just to add to that, from a nuisance perspective, typically we tag about 50 to 60 trees a year, and then about half of those, approximately half of those, are within the right-of-way, and then obviously a lot of them are ones that maybe aren't overly large as well. So just to kind of give you an idea of how many we tag each year.
Right. We do know how expensive tree removal can be when it's bid out, though. I just have one question for you. The only thing I can see, because I think we're on the right track as far as they're on the boulevard, they're on our right of way. If we should probably be the ones taking care of that. If they're diseased trees, we need them gone, and that's a unexpected cost for a lot of people. But maybe this has happened, maybe it hasn't. If somebody doesn't like a tree in front of their house, if somebody doesn't like a tree on the boulevard, they could potentially damage that tree to the point where the city says, we need to remove the tree, and then they just got their tree removed for free. That would have been otherwise just fine. It's a stretch, but opening this up to a cost that the taxpayers of the city could potentially open that situation up. Is there a way to write something into the ordinance change where if intent was shown on a perfectly healthy tree, that would negate the city having cost in getting rid of the tree?
I do believe so. Is my mic on here?
Yeah, I can hear you.
So I do believe so, and really anybody removing or damaging, a right-of-way tree, we already have language for that in there. They really have to get permission from the city. We're gonna work on getting a permit. We've never had one in the past. But I think if there was clear intent to see that something was damaged from that, we've had a couple instances of that where you can see clear damage to it, that at that point, we could write language that it's no longer the city's responsibility to remove it.
Okay,
Mr. Chair?
yeah.
James, could we, if we were to approve this, could we make it so it doesn't affect this year, just establish it so it begins, say, beginning of 2024? So we don't have any expenses we didn't plan on?
Yeah, that's a potential as well. We could start with, I'm not sure how that would work, contracted forces. Would we, and this is why we want to have a discussion tonight. Does contracted forces do all the tree removals within the right of way? Do we assess only dangerous or difficult ones? Does Public Works remove some of them? You're thinking about it, probably should be an all or nothing. That would probably make the most sense. Either, it's all responsibility, or the city begins taking control of it. I think me and Jesse did have a discussion that we, really only have to contract forces out for really dangerous trees, which, we wouldn't have to tag every single one of them. If there's not going to be a danger to, people or cars or anything like that, things could wait till next year for some trees as well. So we don't anticipate, major costs if the city does want to go the direction of managing their own trees.
Right, I know it may sound like it's off topic, but when somebody has a portion of sidewalk that needs repair, it's up to the property owner to repair that, right? On the right of way?
Yep, so I believe that is,
No, not with the recent charter change. So now the property owner is responsible for dirt, debris, snow clearing in that manner, but the actual maintenance no longer falls on the adjacent property owner.
Forgot about that.
Yeah, I believe we got rid of almost all the sidewalk language.
Yep, okay. Well, that does make a difference then when it comes to what's on the right of way and who's maintaining it and taking care of it.
Right.
property owners, as part of the property maintenance code, are required to mow the grass in that area. They couldn't collect junk and debris either. That's written into the property maintenance code.
What is the history of that change in 2019? Why did we go to the way that we have it now?
I believe the code may have, I don't know a lot of the history of it, but reading through the policy, I believe the code may have always talked about it, but the city of Brainerd wasn't really active in taking trees, and there was kind of a backlog of dead and diseased trees through the city. In the past 3 to 4 years, I know that was really why the policy was developed, to make sure that our dead trees within the city are being taken care of. So I believe that was the main driver to it, and I believe the ordinance did not get revised in any way. It was just more of a policy, and that we are going to begin enforcing it.
I think it would be beneficial if we had more information about where we're at in that process. Because if we've already taken 4 years or 3-4 years, whatever it's been, to clean up a lot of that, what's going on, there's still going to be more trees that are in that category. But if we saw where we're at budget-wise, whether we're going to have to do it all or none, or have that gray area where we would end up arguing with the property owner if we were going to assess them on it. Figure out how many we have that we can just take care of in-house, find out how many we have that there's just no way we want to touch it, insurance-wise or otherwise, and then make a decision kind of based on that information. I don't know if that's the backwards way to do it or the correct way to do it, but I'd also like to maybe visit sending the question over to P&F once we have that. I don't think we need to make the decision today, but I think there's definitely some variables that we could get some more information on before we direct more specific language in that.
Yeah, so next steps, I'm hearing you may want to bring it to P&F to get their thoughts on the budget for the year. It does sound like there's maybe some interest to, whether it's this year or next year going down the route of the city deciding this to manage the public right-of-way trees. Again, I've been the tree inspector for the last few years. Difficult and dangerous trees within the boulevard, probably 5 to 7 trees on average that I would say the city wouldn't be able to potentially handle, and those are going to be, range from about 1,500 to maybe 3,000. So that's where, 20,000 is probably the max you'd be looking at each year. But again, you can have worse years than others. So,
Right.
but
Well,
yeah,
you got to think about storms as well. We have some bad storms here. We had a ton of them go down to our parks last year. I think most of those were taken care of in-house. I don't think we had to hire anything out that I know of.
Yeah, once they're down, we can take care of them pretty easily, but it's
Right.
the ones that are, I guess, like we talked about, hanging over a house or something like that, that we take liability of damaging somebody's private property.
Right.
If we followed staff's recommendation here, it would only be that they're reviewing the vegetation and green items, not to proceed and then come back. That's the recommendation, come back.
Yeah, we're not approving anything right now. We're just discussing what we would like in there. I do like some of the other cities that showed up in our packet. I don't have them in front of me right now, but at least 3 bids were given for each one, so we're not just picking the same tree service each time, trying to keep those bids lower. But also, maybe, once we figure out which ones we can't do, we clump them together and get 3 bids for whatever trees we know that we have to get rid of that year.
and that's what we have been doing in the past.
Okay.
So maybe it sounds like you may want to bring this to P&F. This maybe as a discussion at council tonight. Do we need a workshop or talk about this at full council, or is the next step to bring it to P&F if Safety and Public Works is interested in potentially going this route?
I think we're gonna have a version of going this route. Would you guys agree? I would like to know if PNF would like to even see this before we have numbers on what we have to take down this year, or would we just wait until after we get that? If we're not gonna know that until June, then I don't know.
That's
if
typically
that
when
really
we start
helps.
taking trees is about mid-June. That's when we know it's not going to make it from the previous year.
When does public utilities get involved with removal of trees, or don't they? I know
They will help if there's a tree that's generally reachable, especially with the bucket trucks. They do assist our staff with tree removal if they can. We just recently had one up on in the northeast neighborhood. I think it was on 5th and H, where BPU helped with the bucket truck to help knock down some of the bigger limbs and stuff like that us just from the ground with a pole saw can't get to. So they help us with the bucket trucks to get those.
Aside from that too, if it's a healthy tree, but there's branches that are over power lines, and BPU comes by and takes care of that, is that assessed to the city, the property owner, or they take care of that in-house?
BPU takes care of that for protection of their infrastructure.
Okay. Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, I just have a question, and it's probably something we need to look into, but I would just be interested to see what this does in terms of insurance as well. Because let's take the storms that we had this last year as a case. The tree in the boulevard across from one of my brother's houses fell on the neighbor's fence. Now, that then went through his insurance in terms of taking care of the fence. What does that mean in terms of, if we're taking responsibility for every tree in the boulevard, does that mean that our insurance then is on the hook for every single time something happens?
I don't believe so. I believe kind of that falls under the act of God type of conditions where your insurance doesn't necessarily put you liable for that if.
But are we taking on that asset then, is what I'm asking? Because currently I believe that it's still within the property owner.
Potentially, if there was a dead tree that we identified and again didn't get to, they could make an argument for negligence. But as for like a storm, I don't think that we could be held liable for a storm.
It's just a question that we probably need to look at, because if it's going to affect that in a major way, we need to know who's responsible in those instances.
And that's, conversations as a tree inspector, that's how I believe it is. If it's deemed a dangerous tree, and then it would fall over, there's potential liabilities for that. So that's something to consider.
Aside from that as well, anything that is bid or taken care of, contracted out, when they take that tree, do we typically have that contractor grind the stump as well or leave the stump? Because I know the city has the capability to grind the stump, which could also save on that assessment.
Yeah, so right now we are, because they're being abated and we need to take care of it, and the tree company's there. Right now, that would be assessed to the property, but the city does have a stump grinder and would be able to do that on their own
Okay. I would say
to save costs.
add something about saving costs through stump grinding is in-house as well,
Exactly.
if we can. You guys have anything else you want to add in here?
On that note, I guess if you're going to pay for removal of branches and all that, we got the chipper too, don't we? Is that something we could also, besides grinding a stump, is that something we'd be considering as well?
We typically chip whatever's small enough to go through the chipper.
Okay.
One thing that could save costs that I've heard from in the past is if they would be able to haul the debris to a city site that would be chipped. That would be a potential instead of them having to haul it, to wherever their dump sites are.
Okay. Yep, Mr. Mayor?
My final question that I'd just like to have added during the discussion later on is what is this going to mean in terms of employees as well? Because it would, just from what we've dealt with in the past in terms of what we have on staff, chances are this is more than likely going to meet another employee at some point as well. So I think that needs to be added to the discussion to make sure that we're being due diligent about, once we take it on, we're taking it on, so.
That's why I think it's good to send this to PNF too, not just for what it's gonna add to our budget, but what it's gonna do to personnel as well.
And we did have that discussion with Streets Department, the street supervisor. He does believe that there would be enough time within the summertime when these things would typically happen to accommodate for these things. So, but certainly discussion to have at PNF as well.
Okay. Do we need a motion? You guys, I feel like a motion would be pretty lengthy at this point, but I think,
Well, we can direct you to begin reviewing.
we can just do a directive on this one, but I would say maybe bring this back up, see whether PNF wants to review some of this.
Yeah, so maybe next council meeting to see if PNF wants to discuss this. Might be the
Yeah.
next
So we
route.
can have this thing figured out by the time we're actually cutting trees this year, if we're going to take care of as much as we can in-house at least, at the very least.
Okay.
All right, let's move on to the next item, number 7, another discussion item. This one is regarding on-street parking of unattended trailers. Is this Mr. Dean?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, thank you, Mr. Chair. Another discussion item, like you said. So there's been some complaints that we've received regarding parking of trailers and towables on the street. Staff has also had difficulty during this very snowy year of clearing snow around unattended trailers left on street after modest snowfall events that don't rise to the level of a snow emergency. So currently the code specifies that all vehicles, including trailers, cannot be parked for longer than 48 continuous hours, and then they have to be moved 3 blocks away for an additional 48 continuous hours before they can return. So when a complaint is received, we send those reports to the police department to begin tracking the vehicle and then following up 2 days later. In the instance of unattended trailers, besides the complaints that we've received from the public, staff has continued to have difficulty clearing snow and sweeping around those trailers. While they do have to move, it is difficult for staff to have the time to return to every spot 2 days later to clean up what was missed. Staff would like to discuss with the committee about a potential ordinance prohibiting unattended trailers on street between November 1st and March 31st to keep streets clear for snow events. In addition, some more discussion about revising the time unattended trailers can be left on street between April 1st and October 31st, so really the summer months, to only 24 continuous hours and potentially 7 days between returning.
Define unattended trailer.
One that's not hooked up to a vehicle.
So if I live wherever and I just keep it hooked up to my vehicle and park on the street, that qualifies as attended? And I can sit there indefinitely until I
You would be under the rules of the 48 hours then.
All vehicles are. So,
So if I come back, but what I mean is, okay, so I have my trailer connected to my truck, and in the morning I disconnect and I go to work, and I come back and I hook it up again. Is the clock stopped then at the 40, you see what I mean?
Correct. Yep. That's something that we would have to discuss and figure out if there's a way to put language in there. From an enforcement standpoint, it'd be difficult.
yeah, I think since we're complaint-based, most of these would go, most vehicles that are parked on the street or trailers that are parked on the street are in residential areas where the neighbor is the one to make a complaint. Usually they'll make the complaint after it's been sitting there unattended and ignored for days on end, more than 48 hours probably. But I don't think we're gonna get complaints for people that just wanna bring their boat to work every day. I don't know, that's one way around it, I guess. But that's up to the person if they wanna do that. I don't know if we have any, the only other issue I can think of that this might not be helpful with is, the 24-hour thing. If you have somebody over at your house doing demolition or they just have a trailer, say for brush, something like that, where they're doing a cleanup and it's there for an entire weekend or an entire week, maybe just filling up a big, tall trailer, 24 hours isn't enough for a lot of those projects.
Staff did discuss that. So in our code, it does call out for use of the right-of-way that people should be filling out a permit. So that is something that we discuss, is creating a right-of-way permit, right-of-way use permit that we would review when a contractor is going to be parked on street for an extended period and what that would look like. So that way we can also forward that information over to police department, our street department, first responders. So people are aware that there's potential for use out in the right of way. We just had a request out in the southeast Brainerd for somebody to put a dumpster for a house clean out. So utilizing a right of way permit, a right of way use permit for instances like that. So in your instance of a trailer for a contractor, we would request that they fill out a right of way permit for that. So we are aware of the ones that are left on street for an extended portion of time.
That's already happening currently.
We do not have a permit right now, so we would want to put one in place. It would be probably a no-cost permit, but more of a notification for staff.
Okay. I'm still hesitant on 24 hours compared to 48 hours just because it can happen. Somebody can come by and be visiting for a weekend and their boat or whatever camper might sit on the right of way or on the street for the entire weekend, which would put them in violation. But at the same time, I don't see that being complained against either.
Mr. Chair, we also have people that park for 3-4 days ahead of the 4th of July along the street, do they not? Or take up, I mean, does that apply? Do we waive those folks from doing that?
I don't,
Is that my
I don't
mistaken?
know. You might be. Maybe that's something that they used to do.
Okay.
But I haven't noticed that in recent years. Have you? You're the 4th of July guy.
And I'm the 4th of July guy. People will still mark their spot. It doesn't mean that they won't necessarily park their vehicles, but it doesn't seem, I mean, you're also coming off of COVID too, so you
Yeah.
know, all bets are off.
Coming out of what?
COVID. Most of the ones that I see in Northeast tend to be, people visiting. And 24 hours is not enough if you've got your in-laws driving through and visiting.
Unless they want to bring it wherever they go.
Well,
They don't usually. So,
or they're my in-laws, in which case 24 hours is way too long.
Can I just ask a question? What trailers are we dealing with that are the issue?
So it could be, any unattended trailer, so it could be a car trailer, an ice house, semi-trailers. Especially in the industrial district, we have a few businesses that do leave unattended trailers. They try to rotate them out, but they do leave those on street. Like I mentioned, especially during snow and sweeping seasons, that can be difficult to work around.
Also seen like campers, construction trailers, kind of pretty much everything.
I think last year we had a Ice Castle Fish House with a generator running on the street. I remember a complaint for that. They were just camping in town.
Fish are biting.
I don't think you can do that either. I don't know if that's something that is already written into the code or not, but. that would
Typically,
fall
when
under
hooked
this
up to a generator, that would be a violation.
one. Okay. Well, that's good. I think you guys are on the right track here. I'm not totally against the 24 hours because I don't think it's going to be coming up very often, and when it does, it's understandable if somebody's family is around and they're going to be gone next week. I don't think that's going to be something that people complain about too much, but.
Unless they're already fighting each other.
Right.
It's already a nasty neighbor issue.
Or if it's your own family and you want them to.
Yeah, I might call on my in-laws.
Yeah.
Show you.
I would direct you guys to, in my opinion, write it up the way that you have it presented here. Once the specifics are nailed in there, maybe we have one more talk at finalizing it.
Do like a draft ordinance.
Right.
Yep.
Yep. Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, I have a few fears with this, and I can speak about it at the council side as well. We live in an area where people like to go boating or they like to go ice fishing, and so that becomes my concern. You know, the work trailers are a part of people operating a business. Hopefully, those are continuing to move. I do know in the last handful of years, we have had some issues with people, specifically with the fish houses, but in one instance, we had a gentleman that liked to take his boat out on the weekends. And so that boat would sit there in front of his house for the entire week, and then he would take it out Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then it would sit there for the entire week. Now, obviously, people that live around him have a problem with that, but my secondary issue to this is that we require parking pads for any vehicle that's parked within the yard. And that becomes my bigger concern with this, is that where are we telling people to put their stuff then? And if we're gonna tell them to put it there, are we then gonna hold them to the fact that they need a parking pad to place that vehicle as well? So we have a 48-hour rule. I like the 48-hour rule. I wanna make sure that that we're looking at this holistically and understand what are the issues and why are people doing it. If it's someone parking an RV and running a cable to it and having their family camp out there, that's an issue. You know, that's just an issue. But if it's a guy with a boat that wants to go fishing every once in a while, well then where are we telling him to put it becomes the next thing. And as a proponent of on-street parking, I just want to make sure that we have solutions in place if we're going to start looking at things like this, but also not dragging into the weeds as well.
I would rather see the boat on the driveway or in the backyard than in the front yard. That doesn't always work at every house, but that's also up to the owner of the said boat to figure that out. Sometimes you can't park it at your house in the front or the back or on the street.
I'm more, I'd advocate more for the winter rules here as opposed to in the 48 hours, I think that's better than 24, as much as I understand the need to have these items removed, so plowing and that, but in the summer, that's not the issue so much, so, boy, not sure where to go with this one.
It is another one that's kind of tough until you see the actual draft, and when you see the details of the draft, then I think we can tweak it or change it if we need to, so.
It just sounds like there's a little bit more trepidation about the summer restrictions than the winter. If that's generally the consensus, what I'm hearing from the committee, that might be the direction we go with the draft ordinance, would be more specifically for the winter restrictions rather than the summer.
Except for the urban camping. Knock off the urban camping.
Call it stealth.
Yeah,
It's
not
not
so
very
stealth with
Not
those
with a
giant
generator.
things.
All right, let's move on to the final item, number 8, direction on active code enforcement. Mr. Kronvik, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So staff has addressed repeat garbage offenses since 2021 at 1306 Oak Street. The property owners have received numerous notice of violation letters, citations, and abatements of the property. Invoices have also been sent. We have not been contacted from those property owners. It is homeowner occupied. We have not been contacted regarding the garbage issue. So this being a health hazard, there are other violations that have been, that have occurred at the property, but this being a health hazard and a repeat violation, staff recommends seeking legal action at this point. In some of the pictures that you're able to see, there's at times 200 garbage bags that have been in the backyard. This is the most recent picture. And the city attorney could maybe elaborate on what this would look like, but from the conversations, this would most likely be in the form of filing an injunction against the property owner and seeking a restraining order against further violations of garbage. I'm sure, and the city attorney could maybe clarify on this as well, there's probably still be a chance for this owner to remedy the situation before, I guess, even going further with it. And certainly can answer any questions, and Attorney Langle could as well.
You guys have any questions?
Well, when you talk about restraining order on this issue, would it be, you just monitor it on a daily basis, and if there's a violation, another bag, then you get cited for that restraining order violation? Is that an appearance for a judge? That's typically, a HRO is issued by a judge. We can't do that ourselves, can we?
Mr. Langle, do you want to answer that?
Sure. No, the city cannot issue a restraining order. It would be, what you're going to have is an injunction likely against this property owner, enjoining him from this continuing violation. If you do have a violation, we're going to have to bring it back before a judge at that point and look for harsher penalties against the property owner.
Sorry, I didn't catch all that. A man just walked in here with a caterpillar on his face. It's a little distracting. Sorry. What is it exactly as an injunction?
So an injunction is a court ordered in basically telling the property owner not to violate the city code anymore. If he violates the injunction, we have to go back to court and seek a penalty from the court for that violation. There'd be like an order to show cause as to why he should not be further penalized, possibly even jailed for violating the injunction. I mean, at this point, it's not even at this point. It's already been a health issue.
Yeah.
He's got.
This is our most repeat offender that we've had since we started changing the way we do this. So I think moving forward with this recommendation is probably the best decision.
I would move to do that, Mr. Chair. Move
Second.
forward with the staff's recommendation on
A
this.
motion and a second. Any more discussion? Hearing none, go to a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. We can adjourn to the council meeting.